Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would kind of do a voiceover here with some training footage in the background and show you guys a summary that Aragon put up. And this is the stuff that we need to look at, and people need to really and truly understand that these people out there who are promoting this sort of diet, they need to understand it is extremely fringe for people who exercise. And you note the difference, the people who usually promote these diets, 99% of the time. All right, I understand there are a couple of exceptions with people with advanced degrees, but you need to understand they're in a tiny minority. I mean, even to the point to where the number of people who promote this sort of diet for athletes or athletic people who have a PhD or an advanced degree is about the same percentage of medical doctors who think that HIV and AIDS aren't related at all. All right, you need to put that in perspective. You know, we talk about stuff like that. You want to talk about a consensus. There are a number of leading PhDs who say that AIDS is not caused by HIV in any ways, right? So do you go with what the majority say, or do you go with what 2 or 3 doctors in the entire world say? And that's what you have to look at when you think in these terms. And that's the thing, you know, people will follow a silly-ass YouTuber purely because they're ripped, purely because they're lean, and they will say, okay, well, I'm going to listen to him, but they don't look at what all the actual legitimate experts in sports nutrition say. They completely ignore those people, and they'll listen to someone like Jason Whitrock, who clearly just uses drugs to get lean in a keto diet, or someone like Brandon Carter, who's an ignoramus, clearly an ignoramus, who had the same physique before he did a ketogenic diet. They'll listen to people like this, and they won't look at what people who actually know things say. Take guys like Aragon, very well respected in the online fitness community, master's degree, does continuing education for personal trainers. Like, he writes a lot of the continuing education material, has a big research review. He is the personal nutritionist of multiple NFL players, multiple pro natty bodybuilders, and at least one WWE wrestler. Right? He is their personal nutritionist. So this isn't someone who doesn't work with top-end clients on top of it. And this is his opinion on it. Okay, he goes over, look at the short-term versus long-term of ketogenic diets. This is going on the body of evidence out there. Not people's personal anecdote, but actually looking at studies right there. Fat loss. Short-term, keto is as effective as other diets when calories are matched. It does the same thing for long-term. Now, he's being generous there. Do you know why? Because when studies do find a difference, they never are in favor of keto. People say, what? Does it offer a metabolic advantage? No. High-carb diets seem to offer the only metabolic advantage, but they don't offer it in every study. Keto never seems to produce superior fat loss. It's either equal, most of the time it's equal to other diets, and in a few cases when one is found to be superior, as in more fat loss for the same calories, it's almost always the higher carb diet. Actually, it is every time when it's done in a metabolic ward, not self-reported data. Self-reported data is the only time keto ever seems more effective, including people who say, I lose more when I do it. That's your self-reported data. You didn't put that in a lab and have yourself studied. Trust me, when every person who's ever said that, when they get put under laboratory conditions, it turns out they're actually wrong. They actually lose more fat on a higher carb diet than a keto diet, or the same. But over half of the studies have shown it's the same, so therefore that's going to be more the consensus. But it is important to note that any studies that do show a difference, it's always in favor of the higher carb. All right, lean body mass. More lean mass, water, glycogen, and protein is lost with ketogenic diets, both the short and the long term. Again, people who do these diets, well, I preserve muscle and I gain muscle. Actually, you would have gained more muscle on the same calories on a higher carb diet. You would have kept more muscle when cutting. But the water loss is one of the reasons people think that they're losing weight faster on a ketogenic diet. Because the thing is, like even for me, when I go to do powerlifting meets, I stay on 4,000 calories, and I'll do a keto diet as part of my water cut for the final 10 days. Do you know why? You shed a ton of water while overeating. All right? You lose water on a ketogenic diet, always. People mistake that for fat loss. You lose more glycogen in your muscles, and then that'll come down to performance, and more protein. In other words, when we do look at that, what happens always When two groups are compared on similar calories, even if the fat loss is the same, the keto diet loses more muscle mass. And that's pretty universal in the studies. In other words, in the majority of the studies in the metabolic ward, when people are put on similar amounts of calories, people who do the ketogenic diet lose more muscle and more water, even if they lose the same amount of fat. In other words, it's the worst diet you can possibly do for preserving muscle mass. All right, that is overwhelmingly obvious in the science. So people who are like, oh, I'm doing keto to recomposition or hold on to my muscle while I'm losing fat, that's the worst diet you could possibly pick. The best diet for dropping water weight, drop scale weight real quick on those diets, but you also lose more muscle. They're inferior for keeping muscle mass, and that is agreed upon by all the experts who study it in the metabolic ward. Right, where they can study it firsthand and really monitor everything and do DEXA scans on people, and the researchers weigh everything you eat, you will lose muscle mass on a ketogenic diet if you're losing body fat. And you will almost always lose more muscle than a higher carb diet. Carbs are simply more anabolic to muscle tissue than they are fat tissue. Hands down. Universally agreed. Anaerobic performance, that's weight training. Ketogenics seem to be outperformed by other diets. Performance is typically lowered in studies without control groups. In other words, people lose resistance training ability on keto diets, particularly when the scale is going down. They're inferior to every other type of diet that's been tested in terms of performing weight training performance in the gym, or any sort of anaerobic performance, HIIT cardio, high intensity training of any type. Aerobic performance is cardio. Keto seems to be outperformed by other diets, yet the data is inconclusive. Performance is maintained or lost in studies without control groups. In other words, ketogenic dieters lose endurance for marathons and things like that when compared to a different group who eats more carbs. Same thing, we go down to strength performance. Strength can be increased similarly to other diets. However, several studies suggest keto might be inferior. In other words, some studies show that on a keto diet, if you weight train, you can usually gain strength if food is sufficient. But performance is inferior to other diets. And that makes sense when you think about it in terms of the fact that glucose is your training fuel in the weight room. Now, there are exceptions. And people be like, well, what about, what's his name? Jamie Lewis. He does these sort of diets. Jamie Lewis does a massive carb refeed on the weekends. And Jamie Lewis loves Tren. I am personal friends with someone who has helped him with his stacks in the past. Personal friends. Jamie likes Tren. He likes Tren a lot. He also likes Test a lot. Why are we going to talk about someone using a couple grams of gear and claim that their diet is somehow superior because they've busted some records? This is also a guy with an ultra extreme training approach, ultra extreme training philosophy who uses a lot of drugs for his size and weight. Like they're higher than you would expect for someone in his weight class. I can tell you right now those other two things are bigger factors than his ketogenic diet. Again, people using one person as an example because it's part of his philosophy. And he also does an all carnivore diet. He's all into that we should be living on meat because it makes us more aggressive. And if you're more aggressive, you're going to train harder. All right. He has a very aggressive, angry approach to everything. Kill the weak, eat the weak, including people. Like that same guy's actually said, by the way, he would kill and eat people if it was legal to do so because he thinks it would make him a better athlete. Again, you're dealing with one very extreme individual, and people will use that then as proof. But there are bigger and stronger guys than him who are just as lean in the world. Might be that the keto diet lets him stay in that weight class because he doesn't gain that much muscle. It keeps his appetite at a certain threshold. Put that in perspective. There are guys with just as good of Wilks scores, if not better, who have more muscle than him, who are ultra lean also, who eat carbs. They just happen to be bigger because they're in a higher weight class because they have more muscle. Again, going back to the point, ketogenic diets aren't particularly great for muscle. All the data suggests that. Even this chart here that Alan linked suggests that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.